History of the Soul War by eddieddi. Supplemental information related to Lesson 9. Dune Chips, Declassified. The human lecturer stood impassive, watching the students observe him. There was a mixture of undisguised contempt and awe. He was, after all, not a member of the Federation, standing here on the hallowed ground of the Federation University for tricol officers and high-ranking diplomatic candidates. Yet at the same time, he was Odin's son, Admiral of the Aesir Strike Fleet that was at this very moment in high orbit. An event not seen in the history of the Federation, a non-allied fleet in orbit over a Federation capital world. He wore his full regalia, medals of honor and battle honors pinned to his breast, an eye patch over one of his eyes. The eye worked perfectly, but hidden inside the eye patch was a display device that kept him up to date with anything his aides aboard the Odin deemed worthy of his attention. Right now, it was keeping him informed of the status of the security cordon. He watched the digital timer tick down slowly to 0. Greetings. His tricol was almost perfect, only lacking the antenna to convey the more subtle emotional ticks. I am Admiral Eric Odinson, Commander of Strike Fleet Aesir of the United Conglomerate of Human Colonies. I am sure you are all aware of this, since this lecture has been widely published. In an act of goodwill, the Federation invited Strike Fleet Aesir and myself to give a lecture at each of its capital worlds. He said, and clicked onto the first slide. There was a hexagonal disc of metal, with most of its center taken up by nanometer-sized circuitry layered over one another. This is a Direct Neural Interface Unit, or DNIU, or as we call them, Dune Chips. I will not bore you with the history of how they came to be. What is important is that as of... He paused to check the timer in his eye patch again. 3 human minutes ago, the duration of time required for the uses of them in the human military to become declassified, at least a large portion of them. And as a show of goodwill, my lecture will be covering these devices. He smiled at the packed lecture hall. He was almost certain that there were Federation spies and researchers just waiting to get their hands on more human tech. He was looking forward to disappointing them. Let us begin with what the Dune chip does. It is a direct interface with the main human nerve system, specifically the spine. He pressed a button on the small remote he was carrying, and the image zoomed out, animating and showing the hexagonal section being slid into the human spine, right below the skull. This allows it to recover all kinds of nerve data. The prime examples are a subject's heart rate, nutritional state, and other such things. This allows doctors to quickly acquire critical information about injured patients. It can also input the data into the nerves, sensations such as touch or visual information. He moved on to the next slide. This one displayed a human sitting in a reclining chair, seeming to be asleep on the bridge of a ship. One of the key features of the Dune chip is its security. I cannot go into details, but suffice to say that it is a two-way quantum lock to prevent hijacking of the subject, nigh unbreakable, unless you had a Matryoshka brain. This caused some light murmuring. No wonder the humans were so confident in sharing this. No species had ever produced a type of stellar engine. Now, it is known to the Federation that human forces use Dune chips to enable the use of mobile infantry suits and enhance fighter pilots' capacity. However, humanity has been using the Dune chips for far larger things. Most of a British crew has a Dune chip implant, and almost all of them make use of it for their duties. It is not uncommon for captains to issue commands via the ship's AI using the chip. He gestured at the image. This is Admiral James Child of Kadath of the Warfleet Lovecraft. At the time this photo was taken, he was prosecuting a defensive war against a group of pirates. The Admiral spent most of his time prosecuting the war using his Dune chip to interface with the ship and the ship's AI. He moved on to the next slide. This was the image of a human tank. Humanity now makes use of the Dune chip in almost all its military hardware. Tanks, for example. Each member of the crew can be fed unique information to aid in their tasks. He quickly flicked onto the next slide. This was an image of what appeared to be a human suit of power armor, however far larger. It also had 4 legs. This is what we are calling a mechanized combat horse, or mechs for short. The quadrupedal machine was almost as large as a cargo shuttle. One arm carried what appeared to be a starship-sized coil gun, and the other was holding a huge rotary cannon. Mounted on its shoulders were several heavy missile racks. For comparison's sake, there was a human tank parked next to it. The tank was about a quarter of its height and barely half its length. Normally, controlling such a large machine would be impossible, not to mention other issues, such as balance. However, with the use of the Dune chip, it is possible to make use of a human's innate sense of balance and allow a single human to command such a war machine. Worried looks were shared amongst the students. They'd been under the impression that the humans had toned down their weapon development after the Soul War. They were confident that they were wrong. The next slide replaced the quadruped war machine. This time, the image was of what appeared to be an AI core. Over the 2 centuries that we have been using the Dune chip, there have been some irregular occurrences. At this point, over 90% of human ships contain an AI or VI of some kind. Human warships contain some of the most powerful AIs humanity can construct. In theory, the captain is able to pilot a ship with no extra crew with the assistance of the AI. Several students shifted at this. The Admiral smiled. He narrowed down who at least a few of the Federation agents were. However, when an AI is first installed, it has no personality so to speak of, no likes or dislikes. AI serve far longer than the human crew, and it appears that most human-made AI acquire tiny portions of personality from humans they interact with over long periods of time. Normally, this would never be an issue. An AI would never interact with enough humans over a long period of time to develop a personality. However, on a human warship with a crew of several thousand and over the course of 2 centuries, the combination of a Dune chip interfacing and day-to-day interaction has given AI personalities. He waved at the screen and it suddenly changed. A woman was sitting there, dressed in a human military uniform. This is Scourge, the Olden's onboard tactical AI. The image waved and smiled. It was hard to tell if it was just a well-timed video, at least until it spoke. It's a pleasure to be here, though a little cramped. The systems within this facility are a little slow for my liking, but yes, here I am. I am Scold. As the Admiral said, I am Odin's AI. I am also the keeper of its stead. I need to go, I'm afraid. Farewell. The image faded. The voice had been lighthearted and kind, but distant. Now, you might be asking, what does this have to do with the Dune chip? Well, as I have said, Dune chips can receive neural signals through continual Dune interfacing and day-to-day interaction. It is possible for an AI to build up an almost perfect replica of an individual's personality, experience, and even bearing. These digital ghosts can often remain in the system for years. It took our fleet almost half a century to notice them. However, now that they've been noticed, they are still technically serving crew members, honored dead that live on in the machine heart of the ship they served in. Human laws prevent the use of these digital ghosts without permission, and not until the owner has passed away or retired. Each fleet has their own name for them. He clicked onto the next slide. This was an image of several dozen human ship crewmen, standing and laughing with one another. This means that each human aboard the ship with the Dune chip implanted has access to the knowledge, experience, and expertise of every human who has served aboard the ship before them. It is even possible to upload these machine ghosts to other AI chips, such as fightercraft or mechanized combat units. He paused, looking at the shell-shocked lecture hall. He had just outlined a form of digital immortality, all because of a clever AI and a small chip implanted into the human body. That is all for this lecture. However, for any students who wish to talk to any of the SCR fleet's honored dead, the shuttle at Docking Base 7 will remain parked there for the next 6 cycles. The Admiral snapped a smart salute to the class and walked off, using his eye patch and Dune chip to turn the coffee maker on the shuttle on. He'd have a hot cup waiting for him as he got back.